The wind slid between skyscrapers like an uninvited guest, rattling windows and carrying the smell of coffee, asphalt, and ambition. At precisely 5 a.m., the lights in the penthouse of Richard Holloway flicked on, every morning, without fail. Richard believed discipline was not a skill but a habit, and habits, once formed, were stronger than emotion. He shaved with mechanical precision, adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror, and stared at his own reflection for a brief second longer than usual. The face looking back at him was confident, controlled, untouched by uncertainty. That, too, was a habit, never allowing doubt to stay long enough to be felt. By 5:40, he was in the elevator. By 5:55, he was in the back seat of his black sedan, leather cold beneath his fingers. The driver, Thomas, nodded silently. They had driven together for 7 years, rarely exchanging more than a few words. The car rolled onto Lakeshore Drive as the city slowly woke. Richard opened his tablet and began scrolling through overnight emails, investment updates, overseas calls, stock fluctuations. He did not look outside. He never did. For the past 12 years, the route to his office passed the same place, an abandoned industrial dump on the edge of the city. Broken fences leaned like tired men. Faded warning signs flapped uselessly in the wind. Sometimes smoke rose from makeshift fires, and sometimes shadows moved between piles of trash. Richard never noticed. When his mother vanished decades earlier, the world had taught him a lesson: looking hurts. And so, without realizing it, he had trained himself not to look at anything that resembled loss. That habit made him rich. It also made him blind. On this particular November morning, the sky was low and gray, heavy with the promise of snow. Traffic slowed unexpectedly. Orange cones narrowed the road, forcing vehicles into a single crawling line. Richard exhaled sharply, irritation tightening his chest. Construction again, he muttered. Thomas nodded. Should clear in a minute, sir. Richard tapped his fingers against the tablet. No signal. He frowned and, for the first time in years, lifted his eyes from the screen. That was when he saw the boy. He came running from the side of the road near the dump, waving his arms wildly. His jacket was too thin for the cold, the zipper broken. Mud streaked his pants, and one shoe looked slightly larger than the other. He was breathing hard, shouting something, his voice lost beneath engines and horns. Drivers reacted predictably. Windows rolled up. Heads turned away. One man gestured angrily, another laughed. A woman shook her head as if seeing something unpleasant she did not want to acknowledge. Richard felt a familiar instinct rise in his chest. Ignore it. Let the moment pass. Return to routine. That instinct had protected him for years. But the traffic didn't move. The boy reached the sedan and slapped his palm lightly against the door, not aggressively, just desperately. Richard looked at him, annoyed, ready to dismiss him like everyone else. Then the boy shouted clearly, his voice sharp with urgency. Sir, your mother is alive. I saw her in the dump. Time fractured. Richard stared at the boy, convinced he had misheard. The words echoed inside his head, colliding with memories he had locked away. My mother is dead, Richard said coldly, lowering the window barely an inch. Now step away from the vehicle. The boy didn't flinch. I know how it sounds, he said, his voice trembling but stubborn. But she talks in her sleep. She says your name. She says, Ricky. She cries when it's cold. Richard's breath caught painfully in his throat. No one, had called him Ricky since he was 17. His fingers tightened against the door. The city noise faded into a dull roar as his mind dragged him backward through time. A kitchen filled with the smell of burnt toast. A woman laughing, brushing flour from her hands. Ricky, you'll be late for school again. Eleanor Holloway. She had disappeared after a minor car accident. Memory issues, the police had said. Stress. Confusion. Months of searching. Flyers. Phone calls. Eventually, a death certificate based on probability, not certainty. Richard had learned to live with that uncertainty by burying it under routine. What's your name? He asked, his voice quieter now. Marcus, the boy replied. I bring her food when I can. She's sick, sir, but she's kind. The driver glanced back, alarmed. Sir, this could be a scam. Richard knew scams. He had crushed hundreds of them. But this didn't feel like one. He opened the door. Get in, Richard said. Marcus hesitated. Really? Yes, Richard snapped, more sharply than he intended. Now, as the boy climbed in, the warmth of the car surrounded him. He smelled of smoke and damp fabric. Richard felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest, guilt, perhaps. Shame. The car slowed as it approached the edge of the dump, its tires crunching over broken glass and gravel. Smoke curled into the gray sky from small fires hidden among heaps of trash. The air was heavy, sharp with rot, damp plastic, and something older, abandonment. Richard Holloway stepped out of the car. The cold hit him instantly, but he barely noticed. His expensive coat felt out of place here, like a lie. Around them, makeshift shelters leaned against one another, tarps tied with rope, cardboard walls reinforced with hope. People watched silently, eyes wary. This was a world built from what others threw away. Marcus jumped out beside him. "This way," the boy said, already moving. Richard followed, his polished shoes sinking into the mud. Each step felt unreal, as though he had crossed into another city hidden beneath the one he owned shares in. A place his habits had erased from his vision. They stopped near a collapsed blue tarp weighed down by bricks. Marcus knelt. "Grandma Eleanor," he called softly. No answer. Richard's heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. "Don't hope," a voice inside him warned. Hope was dangerous. Hope destroyed routines. Marcus carefully lifted the tarp. Inside lay a woman wrapped in layers of coats and blankets. Her face was pale, her lips dry, but her chest rose slowly with breath. Her hair, once chestnut, now silver, framed a face Richard knew better than his own. Time collapsed. "Mom," Richard whispered, his voice breaking in a way it never had during board meetings or hostile takeovers. Her eyelids fluttered open. She squinted, confused, then smiled weakly. "Ricky," she murmured, "you're late, again." Richard fell to his knees. All the years he had trained himself not to feel crashed down on him at once. He took her frail hand in his, afraid she might disappear if he let go. "I'm here," he said, choking on the words. "I'm here now." She frowned slightly. "Did you bring your jacket?" "It's cold." He laughed through tears, an unfamiliar sound. "Yes, Mom, I brought it." People nearby began to gather, whispering. Thomas stood frozen a few steps back, phone already in hand. "We need an ambulance," Richard said, his voice steady again, but changed. Now, as they waited, Marcus stood quietly to the side, unsure whether he should stay or leave. Richard noticed him. "You saved her," Richard said, standing and placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You saved my mother." Marcus shrugged. "I just didn't want her to be alone." That sentence hit harder than any accusation. Sirens wailed in the distance. Paramedics arrived, carefully lifting Eleanor onto a stretcher. She clutched Richard's hand until the last moment. "Don't forget me again," she whispered. "I won't," he promised. And this time, it wasn't just a promise, it was a decision. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and warm blankets. Doctors explained the truth gently. After the accident years ago, Eleanor had suffered memory loss. She drifted. Without documents or consistent care, she slipped through systems built for people who fit neatly into boxes. She survived, the doctor said, because someone looked after her. Richard looked through the glass at Marcus, sitting awkwardly in a chair, swinging his feet. That night, Richard did something radical. He stayed. No emails, no calls, no meetings, just a chair beside his mother's bed, watching her sleep, listening to the steady beep of the monitor. For the first time in decades, he let stillness replace motion. And he saw how empty speed had been. Weeks passed. Eleanor recovered slowly. Some days she remembered everything. Other days, nothing. But she was safe, warm, seen. Richard's life began to change. Not dramatically, not loudly, but deeply. He rerouted his morning drive. He funded a medical outreach program for people living on the streets. No paperwork barriers, no conditions. He built a shelter near the dump, staffed with counselors and nurses. And every morning, before work, he walked through it. Not as a benefactor, as a witness. Marcus moved into a small apartment arranged through the program. He started school, nervous but determined. Richard attended his first parent-teacher meeting and sat in a chair that felt more important than any executive seat he had ever owned. One evening, Marcus asked him, why didn't people help her before? Richard thought for a long time before answering. Because they were busy, he said. And because looking had stopped being a habit.